Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our podcast today on the topic of transition from high school to university. My name is Estelle, and I will be your host for today. This podcast was organized by Free Your Mind Initiative, a student run organization dedicated to raising awareness on mental health and mental health education. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and honor the traditional territories of the Blackfoot and the Treaty 7 people, including the Siksika, Pikuni, Kainai, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda First Nations. Calgary is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, play, and help us steward this land, honor, and celebrate this territory. Now to the speakers that have joined us today. If every one of you guys can also introduce yourselves and a little bit about who you are, including your name, school, and which year you're in as of this month, that'd be great. So today we're joined by Navreet, Martina, and Gracia. Martina, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, my name is Martina, and I am in my first year of university at the University of Calgary, and I am studying neuroscience.
Hi, I'm Navri, and I currently go to University of Calgary. I'm in my second year doing a Bachelor of Science in Psychology.
Hi, I'm Gracia. I'm in my first year at McGill University doing a Bachelor of Science, and I haven't declared a major yet.
Cool. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I would like to let everyone know that there may be moments throughout the podcast where personal experiences or stories are shared. Please recognize that we all have different emotional boundaries and stay away from sharing too much about such experiences. If any of you feel the need to take a break, feel free to take a break anytime during the podcast. Now we will dive right into our conversation about the transition from high school to university. So coming to an end of our 12 years of education is a time of both relief and stress for many graduating students. Over 70% of students in Canada choose to continue on their education by entering universities. Some choose to stay close to home, while others leave for new adventures in unfamiliar environments. Today, we will be discussing how the transition from high school to university has an impact on our mental well-being. Feel free to add in any ideas or jump in anytime during the discussion. So I would first like to open up this conversation by getting our speakers to share some personal experiences within boundaries that are comfortable for everyone. So the first question is, how did your transition from high school to university look like? And did you choose to stay close to home or move to another city?
So for me, my transition from high school to university, well, I'm in my second year now, so I've gone through my first year. It was a pretty challenging time. The workload and the expectations of university classes are just at a much higher standard. And personally for me, I had a lot of classes where my grades were reliant on two major exams throughout the entire year, or the entire semester, sorry. And so during that time would be a very stressful and just challenging time. But I feel like as the semester progressed and as we got to the second semester of the year, it did seem to get a little bit easier because you knew what to expect. But for university, I do go to a much larger one, so it was very different not seeing familiar faces that I've been seeing since kindergarten to grade 12. Like I had the same people, so it's so weird seeing new faces in the hallway every single day. And for me, the environment of the actual area was the same because I was born and raised in Calgary, and I decided to go to university in Calgary, mainly because all my family and everybody is here, so I would have been really lonely somewhere else.
Yeah, I am just in my first year at U of C, so obviously I am still a little bit unfamiliar, just because it's really only my second week now. But I definitely think the transition from high school to university is very big. I can already feel kind of the pressure and kind of the different expectations that people have of you now that you're in university, and everything is kind of done at your own time, and it's your responsibility to get things done, which is not really something that I am used to, because high school, I feel like a lot of teachers kind of spoon feed you information, or deadlines and things like that are like very clear and they remind you, but in university it's kind of your own responsibility to take care of yourself and to get your work done. But so far I can definitely see how it can be very mentally draining and challenging, just because it is so much more of like a workload. But I think it's really important to kind of like take time to like take care of yourself and do like self-care and things like that, which is something that I have been trying to do, but we'll see how that goes throughout the semester.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with the workload aspect. I just came from doing a physics quiz and I find that I'm a lot busier than I used to be. I mean, like everyone in the graduating class of 2020, I think our transition this year was a little atypical because of the coronavirus situation. And so it was especially jarring to return to school because I had been slacking off during the coronavirus and because we didn't have exams. So it was kind of a shock to return back to school. But again, the professors are very accommodating and flexible. And so it's nice to be able to know that everyone else is understanding of what you're going through. It does feel a little hard being a student for distance learning, especially since we can't connect with each other on campus. So we're a bit lacking in the social aspect of finally going to university and meeting everyone at orientation. But there are technologies in place to connect with each other virtually. So there have been a lot of setbacks, but again, we must have to adapt to everything that comes our way. As new university students, it might be a little hard at times, but I think we're all in this process of trying to get to know each other and trying to get to know the university and the courses that we're taking.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing your experience in the transition. So backtracking a little bit, for Navri, maybe this was like 2 years ago for you now, but how did you come to make the decisions that you made about entering university? And if you could go back, would you make any choices differently?
Well, I knew that I wanted to continue doing my studies in science because that's just what always sparked my attention. And I knew that I wanted to continue learning and I wanted to do a bachelor's degree. I knew that for most of my high school experience that I was working towards that. But I did apply to university a lot earlier than I was expecting myself to. Like I applied like right when early admission started. And honestly, I think that I wouldn't have done anything different because it was like a lifesaver for me. It was like a little weight lifted off my shoulders and it was like less stressful just knowing that I had my spot and I didn't have to worry that there wouldn't be enough room. Of course, I had to keep up with the competitive averages and things like that, but it was just a lot better for me to know and be more at peace knowing that I do have a spot. I just have to maintain my place. And yeah, I don't think I would have really done anything differently. I think it all went pretty smoothly. I'm doing something I'm interested in. I didn't like choose something that was too difficult for me or something that didn't like spark my attention at all. I think that's very important when you're deciding what you want to do in university or if you're uncertain to like take a year off and just figure out what makes you interested or take a couple classes here and there and figure out like, oh, like I took a psych class, I love psychology, I could take that, or I took a business class in open studies and I like that. But for me, I think taking psychology classes in high school and stuff like that inspired me to go towards the major I'm doing, and I'm really happy at where I'm at right now.
Well, for me, what mainly helped motivate my decision to apply to university and the program I was applying to were my high school teachers. So my bio teacher especially was very inspiring and that's why I decided to pursue bio in university as well. I think part of the reason that I made my final decision on which university to go to was my financial situation. And of course, it's very important that you apply early so that you can figure out what's available to you in order to alleviate the financial burden of going to university, which can be very costly for some.
Yeah, and I can also kind of add on to that. I, unlike Navri, was not that prepared. So I did apply early admission, but I made a lot of decisions that I wasn't really sure about, which I think is completely fine. But going back, I would probably maybe like reevaluate some of my decisions again. I did apply early for most of the places that I applied to. I only applied to 4 universities. but I already kind of knew where I wanted to go. But for some reason, I didn't apply there. So I didn't apply to neuroscience at UC at first. And I actually ended up changing my major halfway through the year while I was applying. But because I was kind of like second guessing myself or doubting what I really wanted to do, I ended up like procrastinating and applying really, really late. I remember I submitted my UBC application like 2 hours before it was due, and I had started like maybe 4 or 5 hours before that. So I really don't recommend doing that. But I would also kind of like go back and maybe make like a plan of exactly where I'm applying and what I'm doing, because I kind of ended up just applying to like some random schools that I was like, oh, this is my backup in case I don't get into this. And I think I definitely should have been more confident in myself, because I think I like definitely lacked that confidence, which is why I was doubting myself in the first place. So that's something that I would maybe go back and fix.
Yeah, so like Martina mentioned, I think a lot of students, like graduating students especially, there's a lot of like questioning and uncertainty and a lot of doubt just in the process, just because we're all new to it. So leading on to our next question, did you ever experience uncertainty during the transition period? And if so, how did you cope with it?
I did have a lot of self-doubt when I was receiving like grades that I hadn't seen before. Like in high school, I hadn't ever seen any grades lower than I had gotten in my first semester. And I really questioned whether or not I was cut out to be pursuing this level of education. Even considered switching my degree at one point, because I was like, these science classes are so hard and they're nothing like I took in high school. But I did continue to stick it out and just like go with it and just see how it goes and see like if I could work towards what I really wanted. And I think it was just majority because I was putting too much stress on myself and I was like burning myself out, and I wasn't taking those proper like self-care days that you should be taking. And you shouldn't be especially with online school now. I think it's just so hard to create a boundary for yourself about what time you should be doing something, because it just feels like you're constantly doing homework and it's just never ending. And I think that burnout is what causes the most detriment to your grades and to your like mental health as well. And so I think that you just have to like sleep is so important. I realized that in my first year, because I was not sleeping. I was staying up until 3 a.m. in the morning, sometimes waking up at like 6, and it would just be terrible for my brain. So, I mean, like my psych professor taught me, he's like, if you take an extra hour studying until like 4 in the morning, or like taking those extra hours, is going to do nothing for you. It would have been more productive if you went to sleep. And because when you sleep is when you retain information. When you sleep is when your brain works to keep that in your head. So sleeping is so important. I cannot stress that enough. Make sure you sleep enough, because you will go crazy if you don't.
Honestly, I feel like that information is really great for me as well, because I am like in that transition period between like high school and university, and I haven't had any like tests or anything like that yet, so I'm still a little bit worried. But I can definitely tell that there is like a big difference between like assessments in high school and in university, so I'm definitely preparing for that. Um, but yeah, I would also agree with the sleep thing. I feel like recently my sleep schedule has been very like irregular, because I also feel like I'm always constantly behind now that I'm in university. I'm not sure if this is a feeling that a lot of people get, but it always seems like whenever I get a task done, I have something else to do right after that. And then after that, I have something else to do again. And then after that, there's like a quiz, which I have to study for. And I feel like that kind of division between like my life and school life that like doesn't really exist anymore. So everything I do is at my desk now. Like I'm always on like we use D2L for our school system. So I'm always on like my computer, and I feel like I don't have any free time anymore. So I think definitely creating like the time to do stuff I enjoy is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this big pervasive fear of not doing enough and not being at your best, which seems to strike a lot for university students. And I know that for myself especially, I always feel like they're like secret assignments that I'm not doing, or like secret deadlines no one told me about. And so there's just this anxiety of not knowing whether you're on task and not knowing whether you're doing enough.
Yeah, I think especially for online classes and stuff like that, now since everything is like so like up to you pretty much, because there's no one nudging you saying, "Hey, like finish this assignment." I know some high school teachers maybe they would like put an announcement like this is due this day, and you're just like you have everything set out for you. But here you have to like open up your agenda and like write everything down and like make a to-do list for the day. But I think it's super important to create a schedule, stick to the schedule, and just make sure you put in those breaks, because during school we get breaks, like you go for lunch. For now, I feel like I just sit at my desk for so long and I just like continue to do things continuously, and I just forget like I have to go eat. Like we get breaks at school to eat. Why am I not eating? So I think it's just so important to just stick to a schedule, because at school you have that schedule, and just try to make the same thing at home. It's it'll help you so much and help you like keep track of everything too and prevent burnout.
Yeah, I think making a schedule
Yes.
for like your workload, sorry, and how you study and how you work especially is very important too, to combat procrastination. Because I know that in high school I got through every day by like doing the assignment that was due the next day. And that's an awful way to work. And that's an awful way to accumulate stress as well, because you're always trying to keep your head above water and trusting. But I feel like that doesn't really work in university, because I tried procrastinating for my very first week, and all of a sudden I had like 5 things that was in completely over my head. And so it's way better to start things early and make a schedule for how you can accomplish everything little by little, instead of trying to tackle it all at once the night before.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing your experience between that transition. I think we mostly touched on what the difference is between high school and university. But just to reiterate, like what would you consider to be like the most significant change that maybe was unexpected for you?
I think the most significant change was just like in high school, I feel like it's just much more personal. So you like know the teachers personally because you've been like going to because for me, I had like some of the same teachers that I had in my junior high come transition with us into high school. And so like I feel like everything was just so familiar, and going into this huge community, because at the University of Calgary, and I think most universities, it's just a very big community, and it's so hard to like see where you fit in. And like of course you have your like faculty and stuff, but it's just going into this like brand new place because it's like gigantic and there's like all these new buildings and trying to figure it all out. And I think just like that personal connection that you had with your teachers in high school was much more different than the connection you have with your profs. But I think that connection can definitely be made in first year. Of course, it's like you feel a lot more intimidated because you have like 300 people in your class and taking intro courses that like lots of people take for their options and stuff. So it's harder to build a connection with the prof. But I feel like as the years progress, the class sizes do end up getting a little bit smaller depending on your school. But I think that for me, the hardest thing was just like I couldn't personally talk to my teacher all the time. But I think my tip for that would just be using office hours, talking to your teachers and trying to like instead of just viewing them as someone your lecturer that you go see on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at this time, try to build a connection with them, and it'll help you just be more passionate too, because like you'll see the way they talk about each of the things that they're doing, because that's their like profession, and they'll be just so like interested in what they're talking about. It'll make you more interested in what you're learning too.
Yeah, for me, I would have to agree with like the big class size thing. Like my chem lecture and my bio lecture each have like 400 people. And obviously, I haven't been on campus yet because I'm doing distance learning. But being on a Zoom call with 400 people is really scary sometimes, because sometimes I don't want to ask questions in the Zoom chat box because I don't want everybody to see my stupid question, or I don't want to unmute myself and have to talk in front of all of these strangers. So I feel like it's definitely completely different from high school, even when we were online during high school, because class sizes would maybe be like 30 or 40 people max. So you would still get that like individual time with your teacher. And another thing that I noticed is that if you are confused about a topic during a lecture, sometimes the prof is not going to stop the lecture and explain that concept to you individually. They kind of expect that you listen to their lecture and you go and learn that material on your own. So anything you don't understand is your own responsibility, versus in high school where you could ask a question in the middle of class and the teacher would stop and explain the concept to you and to the rest of the class. And I feel like that definitely doesn't happen as much anymore because obviously they can't answer that many questions in like a 50-minute lecture. So definitely the whole you have to do it on your own, you're responsible for your own learning kind of thing is definitely what shocked me.
Yeah, absolutely. University is a lot more independent than high school, so you have to take it upon yourself to ask questions and to put yourself out there, even though it's scary because no one else is going to do it for you. So you're going to have to be the one to take on this responsibility. And that is kind of anxiety inducing because it's hard to put yourself out there and have the fear of being judged for what you don't understand, because I feel like to project an image of ourselves that is not necessarily correct, and it's hard to handle blows or like admit that you're wrong, especially when so many people can see you mess up in university.
Yeah, so Gracia, you kind of mentioned just being responsible for your own learning and the independence part. So this is like a personal question that I have just because I haven't gone through the transition yet. I guess university is like the first phase in your life where you become more responsible of what you want to learn and how you want to pursue your learning. I guess there's some flexibility in high school, but it's more under like kind of like a designated or like a chosen education system. So do you guys see that flexibility as kind of like a stress factor to you, or do you see it more as like a liberating like choice you have and as an advantage?
Personally, I think that it's just at the same time, like you're studying something that you love and something that you're passionate about. And I think every single time that you choose something that you love and you're more passionate about, you do better because you want to learn that and you want to do like I don't want to learn chemistry. Like I don't want to be balancing equations, but I'd love to be learning about like how the brain works or like stuff like that or like the neurosystem and like that kind of thing. But I feel like at the same time it can also create a lot of uncertainty because some people don't have something that they are super passionate about and that one thing they want to pursue. Sometimes they have so many. So I think that at like for me it's different because I had something that I wanted, but for some people it differs from person to person. They can't decide on one thing that they love and they really want to do. So I think that it's really important to just take a lot of classes, take a lot of electives because there is room for those, but whether you like think or not, because you're so focused on your academic requirements that you forget that there's like other things too. And taking those classes is I think really important, taking electives and figuring out other things that you're passionate about because at the end of the day when you're passionate about something it's just way better and way more fun to learn it and you just overall end up doing better.
Yeah, I would have to agree, but for me personally, I have always kind of been like I wouldn't say that I didn't enjoy one particular subject, but I like was kind of like generally like okay with everything in high school. So I didn't really like hate any subject in particular or like absolutely love any subject in particular. They were all kind of equal for me. But obviously I did have like an interest in psychology and neuroscience and things like that. So that's why I ended up going into neuroscience. But something that I personally enjoyed or like about my degree was that at least for my first 2 years, it's very structured. So I actually don't get very many electives. But that was something that I was okay with and something that I knew and understood before going into this program. So for me, like I liked them giving me my schedule basically, or they gave me like a plan and that was exactly what I had to follow for my first year. And a lot of people might disagree and say they don't like that, but I personally did because it kind of gave me like a sense of like having a schedule like high school or like having structure. But I would also have to say one thing that I like about university is that even though there is some degree of structure based on kind of what program you're in, I also like that there is still flexibility. So if I chose to not want to take 5 courses a semester, then I could choose to drop to 4 courses, or I could maybe even be like a part-time student and take 2 or 3 courses. And that is completely up to you and based on how long you're willing to extend your degree or how long you want to be attending school. So that kind of flexibility I do really like.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that university gives you a lot of freedom in choosing your courses and choosing your schedule. Personally, I do like having control over what I do. So I enjoyed that as I got to university, I could take courses that I wanted to, and I wouldn't have to fulfill like physical education requirements when I'm not a sporty person at all. So I enjoy that aspect of being able to decide what you want to do in university. But again, it is a little like having a sole responsibility of what you need to be doing, what courses you need to be taking. And so that's why the the freshman program that I'm in right now sets a general guideline for the courses that you should be taking, like foundational sciences, like biology, chemistry, and physics. And then you can supplement that with additional science courses and then other electives. So I guess that kind of that half structure of general options to choose from. But again, good decision. I think that's really nice and motivating for you to work hard on the courses that you actually want to be taking.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing all your ideas. So our last question is, you guys did give a lot of advice to students who may be going through the transition and what they should be focusing on. But as a final remark, what advice would you be giving to graduating students who are now going through the transition?
I think the number one advice I'd say, like when you're about to apply or like during the application time, I think would be just to not be comparing yourself to your peers. Because I feel like a lot of people will be like, oh, this person's already applied, like I'm so behind. They already know what they want to do, they already have their whole plan. Not everybody is going to have their plan right away. Everyone has a different timeline. Everybody has their own thing that they're going to be pursuing. And I think that it's important to not compare yourself because that can end up putting yourself down and just not being super confident about your abilities. You shouldn't compare yourself to anybody else because at the end of the day, your interests are different and everybody has their own way, everyone has their own timeline, and everything's going to end up working out. But I also think that it's important to make sure, even when you're doing online school or going to school, that you're still trying to give it your all. I know that even in COVID, it's harder because everything just seems like it's so optional. But I think just making sure that you're really trying and you will end up, your hard work will pay off. So, and I think that once again, I'm going to reiterate that sleep is super important when you're going to university.
I think the comparison thing that Navreet talked about is a really big thing because that was something that I definitely did in university and or going into university. And I always thought like, oh my gosh, this person already accepted their offer to this place. They already know where they're going, what they're doing, and I still have no idea. And that is completely fine. I think it's really important to keep an open mind because plans change. Obviously, nobody expected COVID to happen, but it happened and we all kind of have to deal with it. So it's okay to be unsure of what you're going to do or how things are going to look. So just keep an open mind and don't be afraid to change your mind. I think it's completely okay to change your mind on where you're going or what kind of program you want to go into. And it's never too late to change. So yeah, that's my little advice.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you guys have said. I also think that in the application process, I know that lots of people try to load up their resume with activities and they just start listing off things that they do. But again, with the comparison aspect, don't try to compare yourself to someone who's simply listing 10 different things that they do all in a week. Because at the end of the day, it's not like what you do that's important, it's the things that you take away. And especially for essay questions for university where you talk about what you've learned, it's important that you can conceptualize these lessons not just from doing different extracurriculars or different impressive titles to put on your resume. I think also a big part of actually when you do sit down to try to get some work done, you have to make sure that you have no distractions and make sure that your flashing notifications aren't distracting you, because that is not your best work, and eventually you just end up taking more time than necessary to do the same tasks, and that's not the most efficient use of your few hours in the day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all the advice. I think that wraps up our discussion about the transition from high school to university. So, once again, I would like to thank all of you guys for joining us today and sharing your ideas with us. If you would like to participate as a speaker at our next podcast or webinar, feel free to sign up using our Instagram bio at Free Your Mind Initiative. You can always contact us with questions or new ideas through our email at info@freeyourmind.com or through our Instagram page as well. Just a quick note that if any of you guys are interested, we will be launching our mentorship program soon, where we connect post-secondary students with mentees to discuss personal mental health and to help mentees out in areas of need. So we are currently recruiting mentors. So if you guys are interested, please feel free to contact us or one of our members and check out our website. So thank you so much for everyone tuning in, hopefully in the future, into our discussion today, and we hope to see you at other Free Your Mind events.